When I told him that the first movie in our film noir series this year was going to be White Heat, a colleague of mine said, "Isn't that a gangster film?" Well, yes, but it's not just any gangster film. Gangster films got their start in 1912 with The Musketeers of Pig Alley, a D.W. Griffith film, and were initially based on shocking newspaper stories with an eye towards social reform. They would almost always focus on a rise from the gutter of a man who was repressed by societal conditions and succeeds despite them, shaping his own version of the American dream. In the 30s, with the advent of sound, came the rattle of Tommy guns and the introduction of new archetypes in the forms of Edward G. Robinson, James Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, and George Raft. But even though the violence and the performances were pushed over the top, the pattern remained the same. The gangster would be forced by social conditions to turn to crime to support himself, become enamored with the life, and come to a tragic end, especially after the Hays Code started being enforced in 1934. But by the time the 1940s had come around, the gangster cycle had been overexposed, and Robinson, Bogart, and Raft were turning to more personal noir films like Double Indemnity, Dark Passage, and Nocturne, respectively. Cagney, meanwhile, had moved away from the crime film and focused on projects more personal to him, including his Oscar-winning turn as Giorgio Cohan in Yankee Doodle Dandy. But these pet projects were not all successful, and by 1949 he was looking for another hit. So he returned to Warner Brothers to do another gangster film. He didn't want to do just another retread of what had come before, however. He wanted to take this character to the next level, to truly make him a psychopath. What he was doing, unwittingly, was creating an iconic noir character. Because the purpose of both gangster films and film noir is to understand the criminal. While the early films tried to understand criminal acts from a social and societal perspective, the noir films sought to understand them from an emotional and psychological perspective. What makes Cody Jarrett a standout noir character is that we never know exactly what his psychological and emotional issues are. We're given several clues. We're told that Cody's father spent the end of his life in a mental institution, pointing to both a hereditary inclination as well as a destructive childhood. Despite that, or perhaps because of it, he has an unnatural fealty and partnership with his mother, who coddles him, actually holding this grown man on her lap, on his bed no less, during one of his attacks. And one of these attacks, some people have called them migraines, others claim he shows signs of being epileptic. The character of Evans in the film explains that as an attempt by Cody to get his mother's attention. Any single one of these might have been cited in another film as the cause of the character's actions. Here, they are all just thrown out there without exploration, enough to tell us that Cody has problems, but not enough to explain away his actions. Cagney's performance, wild as it is in service to the character. His impulsive, impetuous physical movements underline the unpredictability of the character and presage the advent of method acting on-screen in the 50s. Scenes such as those where Cody is having a fit, or the famous scene in the prison cafeteria, show how raw, uninhibited, and genuine Cagney could be. The scene in the cafeteria was actually a surprise to most of the people on set that day. Only Cagney, the guards, and the crew were in on what was going to happen. The director, Raoul Walsh, wanted to capture the captured reactions of the other actors to be as authentic as possible. What Cagney was doing was so new that it took everyone by surprise. This is not a film from the noir canon that is going to feature a lot of expressionist lighting and candid camera angles. Instead, it relies heavily, as Laura did, on clever mise-en-scène to suggest relationships within the film. But it must be said that although Walsh and company knew that they were making a gangster film, they had no idea that they were making a film noir. It was a term that had only recently been coined in Europe, and the first seminal work on the subject was not published until 1956 in France. It was the instincts of Cagney and Walsh, and a general trend toward the psychological, that guided them to make the film as they did. Regardless, it is revered as one of the great film noir, and a significant evolution in the gangster film. So I hope you enjoy the film tonight, and I'll see you next week.